There are 8 billion people on Earth, and a significant portion of them will experience acute psychological distress at some point in their lives. The raw volume of human anxiety, trauma, and estrangement occurring at any given second is staggering. This diagram illustrates the mathematical reality of traditional therapy. We have a finite, highly constrained supply of professional clinical hours, represented by this single central node. Around it sits an overwhelming demand. The connection lines simply run out before they can reach the vast majority of those pulsing red nodes. The traditional one-to-one appointment slot cannot physically solve this deficit. A counselor seeing 30 families with only 4 open slots a week leaves 26 families with nothing. Relying strictly on individual clinical hours to treat planetary-scale distress is mathematically unscalable. To bypass this bottleneck, the Dialogica system proposes a decentralized archive, a way to preserve the clinical substance of an hour so it can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, at any time. The global mental health crisis represents a structural failure of distribution. Engineering a new architecture allows care to move beyond the physical constraints of the clinic, reaching the streets and homes that the traditional appointment currently misses. The platform's methodology is embedded in its name. The word Dialogica comes from the Greek root dialogos, which translates literally to through the word or through reason. This draws directly from the Socratic method, where truth emerges through the active reasoning of two people in conversation. Participants discover insight through dialogue, placing reason over rationalization at the center of the platform's counseling logic. The platform functions as an active system of inquiry rather than a static encyclopedia. It demands that the user participate in the logic of the session, mirroring the cognitive work required in a real clinical setting. Scaling therapy to a global population requires preserving the exact psychological mechanics of a conversation. If the core of healing is active reasoning, the technology must facilitate that specific process at scale. Before any clinical interaction occurs, users are greeted by Zaimaka, a cross-cultural persona who speaks to the user in their native language. This character serves a precise psychological function. Clinical environments carry immense stigma. By placing a stylized avatar at the entrance, the platform intentionally strips away the heavy clinical intimidation factor that prevents many from seeking help. This design choice embodies Socratic humility. The tagline, "Our ignorance can be clarified in nanoseconds," frames the admission of distress as the necessary entry point for clarity. A structurally perfect global archive holds zero value if the front door is too intimidating for an anxious person to open. Archiving real therapeutic dialogue introduces the Gloria problem, a long-standing ethical conflict where distributing a patient's raw clinical session permanently strips away their privacy and exposes their vulnerability. The modern tech industry reflex, shown on the left, alters faces using photorealistic deepfakes, creating a legal surveillance swamp. The right side demonstrates honest synthesis. Using a cartoon rendering completely decouples the clinical substance from physical identity. Psychological data is transmitted, but the person disappears. Stylized rendering provides absolute identity protection. This animated format enables PRS visual overlays. Because the visual field is stylized, geometric shapes can be projected direct on screen, mapping the dialogue subtext. Cartoon rendering provides the necessary ethical framework by prioritizing patient anonymity over photorealism. When deploying synthetic media, the public objection is algorithmic corruption, unreliable AI masked as clinical advice. This pipeline model shows the platform's defense mechanism. Every scenario receives a case stamp, a permanent provenance label declaring what the user is watching. The infrastructure then relies on merit pay, compensating the actors, clinical reviewers, and the original patients. Public trust in synthetic therapy requires an airtight, transparent ledger, detailing exactly how every scenario is funded, sourced, and formally reviewed. The distribution model for this archive borrows from a proven medical ancestor, bibliotherapy. For years, services like the UK's National Health Service have allowed clinicians to formally prescribe specific, vetted books to patients. Dialogica updates this into scenarios on prescription. When an overloaded counselor lacks the schedule to take on a family, they can prescribe 3 specific, vetted scenarios to bridge the gap. The library operates under an open books taxonomy. Shelves are organized by cultural sphere and age group. There are no paywalls, passwords, or credentials required to browse the standard sections. However, this absolute openness presents a specific legal vulnerability. The archive's Adult and Sexual Situations Wing contains highly sensitive clinical material. To protect the platform's viability across multiple jurisdictions, Dialogica implements the One Solid Side policy. A standard age affirmation gate is applied exclusively to the adult content, shielding children while the rest of the archive remains accessible to every adult. A public knowledge commons must be radically open by default to serve the globe, yet heavily fortified exactly where childhood begins. The platform's growth relies on a specific psychological mechanism known as the survivor mission. This is the deeply rooted human drive to extract meaning from personal suffering by using that experience to help the next person. Shared recovery and patient advocacy have built massive support networks in the past, operating entirely on the desire of former sufferers to guide new ones. Clinicians, dating back to the foundations of psychoanalysis, have always sought to share their most educational cases. Dialogica removes the historical wall of confidentiality by transforming the visual identity of the patient, allowing these difficult cases to finally teach the world. This global heat map illustrates the result of that open door. As millions access the archive, their voluntary anonymous searches map exactly what humanity struggles with when no one is watching. The archive treats individual users, but in aggregate, it functions as a planetary diagnostic tool. It exposes the hidden, precognitive anxieties of the human species, directing the platform to generate new clinical scenarios exactly where the demand is highest. There is an inherent danger in feeding human distress into an internet platform. When anxiety meets a commercial popularity algorithm, the system learns to amplify whatever keeps the anxious user scrolling. To survive this, the platform operates under a non-negotiable charter rule. The system's ranking mechanics must optimize strictly for wayfinding and never for engagement. Instead of relying on an algorithm designed to maximize watch time, Dialogica surfaces content based strictly on clinical helpfulness and tiered peer review. It functions with the exact discretion of a librarian guiding a patron to the right shelf. By combining ethical rendering, strict clinical provenance, and wayfinding governance, we can engineer a psychological infrastructure where no one remains unattended simply because a clinical hour couldn't reach their street.